fun on a Tuesday morning. It's 9 to noon. Dave Sinykin in the big chair today. PA out. Stopped in the break room, fill up my water during the break. Saw lemon poppy seed scones available in the break room. A very underrated scone flavor for my money. In fact, if you're going to get like grocery store scones, like Target, Cub, lemon poppy seeds my go-to all the time. It's highly underrated. So pleased to find one there, a little box of them there. I stopped with one. I'm hoping that's it for me. The over-under is 2.5. I'm going to try to take the under. The NBA crowned a champion last night. The Boston Celtics won their 18th World Championship. That means the offseason is now fully in play. Draft, free agency. We welcome NBA scribe, Wolves reporter from The Athletic, John Krasinski. You may have heard of him, to the program on a Tuesday. Johnny, thanks for some time today. How we doing?
Good morning, Dave. I'm doing good. How are you?
All is well. Happy Father's Day. Hope you had a great day with the family on Sunday and had some time off to spend with them. I assume you did.
I did. It was a nice little day. Daughter playing some soccer tournament. She scored a goal, and
awesome.
That was good. And then had some time with both kids in the evening, and so couldn't draw it up any better. So it was great day, great weekend.
Fantastic. I miss those days of scrambling from softball to baseball to whatever it might be. Enjoy those years. As I have 3 in college now, I look back fondly on those days. But I had my kids around me, and my son Jackson watched the U.S. Open with me, and that was great.
There you go.
All right. Celtics put an exclamation point on their 18th title. Were you surprised at the ease by which they disposed of the Mavericks, or in your mind, was it kind of a matchup mismatch like we might think the Wolves and Mavericks were on the other way?
Yeah, I mean, I will say it was a surprise to me, Dave. I did expect the Mavericks to give the Celtics all sorts of problems. I expected the series to go very long. I even thought that the Mavericks could win the series. Maybe it was because I was biased by just seeing the way they took the Wolves apart in their series in the Western Conference Finals, but or maybe it was some lingering doubts about the Celtics that a lot of people seem to have going into these playoffs and into these finals. But whatever it was, I was certainly proven wrong by it. I mean, Boston was the best team all year long, was the best team in the playoffs, and there were always kind of some things, well, they're playing injured teams, well, they're in the East, well, there's this, well, there's that. Well, they answered all of the questions, and they really surprised me, I guess, by how easily they handled the Mavericks. I did think I could see the matchup issues, probably like you could, Dave, with some of the things that the Celtics could present both offensively and defensively. But I did not expect it to be 5-1 with really, or 4-1, with 4, pretty decisive victories the way that it did play out. So hats off to them, man. They were fantastic.
Interesting team the way they were constructed too, like 4 wing guys and then a 38-year-old big man. It's just, you look at how the Wolves have constructed their team completely differently, yet they've got 4 defensive interchangeable parts kind of, and 4 guys that can give you 25 or 30. I mean, you can't just follow the Celtics model, I don't think, per se, but in this era, you can get away with, being undersized, I guess, when you're 4 offensive, if you add Porzingis a 5th, 4 offensive guys are all so multi-talented, and they can all defend. It makes for a interesting cocktail, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. And I do think, obviously one of the biggest edges for the Celtics in this series, number one, far and away, is that they had 5 guys who could hurt you offensively. And the Wolves did not have that. And so it allowed Dallas to be much more aggressive defensively, to hide Luka and Kyrie a little bit more than they were able to do against Boston. And Boston was just really able to exploit that. But the other part of it, that if you want to be a Wolves optimist and you want to look forward, look, I mean, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, they have been in a ton of playoff games. They've fallen short a bunch of times. They've gotten deep and almost to the top and lost. And there were real questions about, well, can this group ever do it? Do you need to make changes? And to the Celtics' credit, to Brad Stevens' credit, they stuck with it. And I think that there's really not a price tag you can put on just the experience of being in a lot of those moments. And I do think that the Wolves are going to benefit from having Naz Reid and Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels and even Cat in these moments for the first time this season. And it's very rare that a team breaks through on its first run. They usually somewhere hit a wall, and the Wolves did in the Western Conference Finals. And so while I don't think they can replicate or duplicate exactly what Boston has done from a roster building standpoint, I do think that they can learn from a lot of the mistakes that were made, or certainly just understand what it takes to win not only to the Western Conference Finals, but to the NBA Finals, and how long it is and how great a shape you have to be in and how mentally tough you have to be. And I think that is a lesson that they can take from this, build on it going forward, and see if they can get just a little bit further next year.
It's interesting to me that you started off by saying, Naz and Ant and McDaniels and even Cat, because I've got a couple texts come in, and you're going to hear it. You already have, and you will throughout the offseason. It's time to trade Cat, salaries, balancing the roster, blah, blah, blah. But to your point, the Celtics have been hearing that noise as well. Tatum and Brown together, that's never going to work. They didn't listen to it. They stuck with it. They found the right pieces around them, and they were clearly the best team from start to finish. How would you answer those antsy Wolves fans? And Double T is among them. He went on our show a couple of weeks ago, and thinks they should explore looking to move Cat if they can find the right point guard in return. He threw out Trae Young, but whoever it might be, a guy that might complement Ant. So in light of what Boston did by not listening to the noise, keeping their team together, how do you feel the Wolves should attack this window that's now open as far as contending?
Yeah, well, what I would say is that I think a lot of, I'm not saying for Double T, but for a lot of people who are immediately saying they have to trade Cat, got to move on, balance the roster, do all those things, I can guarantee you that they were saying the exact same thing last year at this time.
Yep.
And it was, you have to trade Cat. The two bigs doesn't work. They're never going to be good enough defensively. It's a one and done playoff team at best. And that's all there is to it. And the Wolves, to their credit, to Tim Connelly and Chris Finch's credit, hung in there, believed in it, and they stacked games, they stacked experience, and they got a little bit healthier and turned into a real contender this season. And when you make it to the Final Four, you are a real contender. And so I fully believe there is a scenario where you bring it back mostly intact, and these guys have learned. They've figured things out a little bit more. They are a little more mentally prepared. They can make some tweaks and changes to their offense to make it a little bit harder to guard. And they come back with another chip on their shoulder, and they're even better. That is a possibility. And so I do not want to rule that out. I know that the team, and talking to people who are in decision-making roles, are certainly looking at that scenario very strongly and believe in it. But also, I do think that it would be malpractice of the Timberwolves not to at least look at what their options are. When you get that close, you want to get a little bit further. You want to do whatever it takes. The Celtics went and got Porzingis and Drew Holiday. So there are moves that you can make to try and make it that way. The tricky thing that will be with Cat is, can you really get the type of player that is going to be good enough to give you that last couple of inches that you need? Whereas Cat, for what everyone wants to say about him, he's a really, really good player. And they wouldn't be in the Western Conference Finals without him against Phoenix and against Denver. And so it's not as simple as just trade him away and get a point guard or get us another wing. You have to get the right player. And I think that's the hard thing and the challenge that is in front of the Wolves. Is it's easy to say you have to trade Cat, but you have to have a really good option coming back. And I think that's going to be a harder thread to needle, if that's the right one.
Or needle
way to say it.
We could say needle to thread, either way. What aren't there some legal or league limitations on trading Cat the way his contract is established? I thought I had seen something to that effect. Is that true, or did I make that up?
Not right now. I mean, the only thing that is prohibitive right now, Dave, is that it's just a large contract. And so when you're talking about matching salaries, when you're talking about finding the right pieces to come back, you have to find a team that's willing to take on a salary that big, because let's face it, he did not play well in the Western Conference Finals. And so maybe the value is slightly diminished coming off of that series because of how poorly he shot it. And so you have to find a team that's going to take on all of that money and give back value in return. You can't salary dump Karl Anthony Towns. That's not going to happen.
No.
I can tell everyone that whatever decision they make with the roster, whether you're trading Cat or keeping him, whether you're trading another piece or keeping them, it's not going to be to get under a luxury tax, to kind of reshuffle the decks financially. It's going to be because they believe that it makes them better from a competitive standpoint. Glenn Taylor will pay the luxury tax. Alex Rodriguez, Mark Lowry would pay the luxury tax. Everyone's all in on that part of it. It's just a matter of how you get to the point of paying that, whether it is with Cat or whether it isn't. But this is not going to be a case of we have to trade Karl Anthony Towns to mitigate financial difficulties down the road. They feel like they're too close competitively to make a decision like that. And so they will make it for basketball reasons and not for wallet, pocketbook reasons.
That's absolutely great to hear. We're talking with Jonny Krasinski. Before we turn our attention to the Wolves draft, one more question for you regarding the Celtics. I espoused at the open of the show, in light of the fact that the Wolves played the Celtics very tough, 2 overtime games. One was very early in the season, but they split, and it makes you wonder that would the Wolves have given Boston a more competitive final series? It's the question that cannot be answered, but matchup-wise, the way the two teams are built, what do you think? Do you think if it was Wolves-Celtics, the series would still be going?
I think so, Dave. First of all, the Mavericks earned their shot in the finals. They deserved to be there. They were far better than the Timberwolves in the Western Conference Finals. And so they were the right team to represent the Western Conference this season. They, from after making the trade to getting through the playoffs to the way that Luka and Kyrie came together, Derek Jones, Derek Lively, all those guys, they played incredible basketball and deserved to be in those finals and representing the West. That said, as you said earlier in our conversation, it is a matchup-driven league, especially in the playoffs. The Mavericks were a bad matchup for the Timberwolves on a number of fronts. I do think in some ways it sounds crazy and weird, but I think Boston was a slightly better matchup. After watching what the Celtics did to the Mavericks, could I say that the Wolves would beat the Celtics in the finals? No, I can't say that. I think what we've seen is that the Celtics are the best team in the league, and they probably would have found a way. Do I think it would have gone 6 games or maybe 7 against the Wolves instead of 5? Yeah, I think that the Wolves were equipped to do things to the Celtics that the Mavericks had difficulty doing, and were a little more equipped to make it harder on the Celtics than the Mavericks could. And so I think in terms of the matchup, I think it would have been a slightly longer series with the Wolves, but I probably still would have to say that the Celtics would win either way.
All right, let's take a look at the Wolves offseason and the roster and the draft real quick in the next few minutes. There's 4 guys that would love to be in the rotation: Josh Minott, Leonard Miller, Wendell Moore, and Jalen Clark. Minott, the Wolves have to make a decision on by June 28th. If he's still on the roster, he's guaranteed $2 million. So, do you think they pick up that option, if that's what it's called? Do you think Minott's back? And of those 4 guys, who, if any, has the best chance to maybe crack the rotation if you're looking for someone to maybe replace Slow-Mo if he is not re-signed?
Yeah, Dave, I do think Minott is back, mostly because if you let him go, he's super young. You're not going to find another $2.2 million option that at least gives you some kind of upside the way that they think Minott still does give them. I think everyone would have liked to see him play a little bit more last season. there was a lot of high hopes for him in summer league. But I think that the combination of him still being very, very young and still raw from a skill set standpoint, and the Wolves being a top 3 seed in the Western Conference, I think that there were too many stakes on the season, and they were battling for position. So Chris Finch didn't feel like he had many opportunities to let Minot run for 20 minutes for 4 games in a row or something like that to help his development. But they put a lot of development into Josh Minot. They put a lot of investment into him, so I think they will bring him back.
Okay.
Then when you look at who are of those 4, who is the most likely to crack the rotation, I think it might be Minot, even though I think Leonard Miller has the highest upside and the brightest future in this league, just with his skill set, with everything that he brings to the table. But he's just at a position, the 4-5, that is totally logjammed right now with Cat and Nas and Luka Garza and Rudy. So I just think that he might still be a year away. Maybe Minot gets a little bit of a sniff if Kyle Anderson goes at the 3. He's nowhere near what Kyle Anderson is from a cerebral player or anything like that, but they might just give him a chance to see if athletically he can provide a different dimension to them next season if they lose Kyle Anderson. If Kyle Anderson decides to come back on a lower deal, which I think is possible, then I still think you're looking at a top 7 or 8 that isn't going to change a whole lot next year. Not for Minot, not for Miller, not for anyone of the younger players coming in, not for a draft pick that might come in either.
Yeah, and that's what's next. The draft is late next week, and this is a year where the Wolves have their number 1 pick. They also have an early number 2. They'll pick 27 and 37. For many teams, that's just throw a dart and hope you get lucky. But when you have Tim Conley pulling the strings, he's and his staff, they've been very good at identifying talent late first, second round. They've been bringing a lot of guys in for workouts. What can you tell us about what you think the kind of player they're targeting? I think most Wolves fans would say we got to find a shooter. Be nice to find another point guard to back up Mike Conley, maybe an upgrade upside-wise from Jordan McLaughlin. What are you thinking about the draft as we are, 10 days or so and counting?
Yeah, I mean, when you're picking down there, a lot of time it is really best player available. But I think if in a perfect world, there would be either some kind of a point guard who they could put into their system and groom over the next 2 years to eventually be, a guy who can be in the mix with Mike Conley getting older, with Monte Morris's future uncertain, with Jordan McLaughlin's future here very uncertain. Point guard is by far their biggest need, but they also really could use a spread them out 3-point shooter, kind of a 2-3 combo guy that can play on the wing and shoot it. Everyone in the league is looking for those guys.
Right.
So, and this is one of the weaker drafts. If you listen to, the prognosticators and the analysts, in many years. And so, I do think that, the prospects of getting someone who is ready to step into a rotation right away on a team that fancies itself as one of the best in the West is probably low. But Tim Connolly, Matt Lloyd, Del Demps, all these guys are very good at finding usable, good players down in that area. So I think that they can get someone in their system to develop, ideally a point guard or a 3-and-D type of a guy, and let them develop for a year or two. I just wouldn't get my hopes up about getting someone who's going to have an impact early on as a rookie next season.
All right, last one for you. Off a text from our good friend, a frequent texter, Ron from Golden Valley, wants me to ask you if the arbitration between the O2 ownership groups is binding, whatever is decided, and is it possible that a higher rate on the deal might be the thing that gets it done, change the number, and see if the guys are willing to come up with it? Where do we stand briefly, and will we know anything this summer, or is this going to be something that sort of dives into next season?
Yeah, so first of all, I don't anticipate anything happening this summer on this, Cindy. It's a long process that is going to go into the fall before we are ready to see any kind of a resolution. But a very good question by Ron in terms of for people understanding, and what I didn't know and I've only recently uncovered is that this is definitely whatever happens in the arbitration is binding.
Okay.
So there is not really an avenue after this to challenge legally unless you can allege that one of or the several of the arbitrators are biased in some way and tampered with or compromised in some way, which is very, not going to happen. So whatever happens when this gets decided, it will happen, and both sides will have to go. If Glenn wins, he keeps the team and goes forward. Mark and Alex win, they go to the NBA for approval, and then can take over if the NBA approves of their whole group with Mayor Bloomberg, with all these guys that are involved here. So that's the biggest thing to understand, is that there will be no more legal challenge after this, but it also is going to take a while. I would even expect it to be maybe even into next season before we have a clear-cut answer on who's running the show here.
It's the Wolves way, right? It's just everything's up in the air. That's what we expect as Wolves fans. You are the absolute best. Thank you for the extended time on a Tuesday. Enjoy your pseudo off season, and we'll continue to enjoy your stuff as you chronicle the Wolves off season in the Athletic. Thank you, Johnny.
Always happy to join you, Cindy. Thanks very much.
John Krasinski, read his stuff at the Athletic. He is spectacular. And the Wolves off season officially in play with the NBA season over. We'll pause here. I want to touch on the Twins. Back in action, if the weather permits, tonight. And Rory McIlroy's mea culpa, kind of, his explanation via Instagram following his collapse in the U.S. Open. We'll touch on those things. Next segment on The Fan.
5 years in the making. Root Party is back in person. Join us for the return of Root Party Friday, July 19th at Forgotten Star Brewery in Fridley. Come hang out with all your favorite fan personalities. Play your favorite fan games for great prizes. Enjoy live music from the Chris Hockey Band. And don't forget about the great food, drinks all night long. Get your full details now. KFAN.com, keyword party. KFAN.com, keyword party.
It's 9 to noon on The Fan. We're about halfway through. I'm Dave Sinykin, and for PA today, Sinykin and Blake Moore hanging out till noon. Common Man follows, noon to 3. Have you dipped in and out at all of the U.S. Olympic trials, swimming and diving this week?
I have not, no. Should I be diving in?
You might want to dive in. I enjoy it. To me, it's the perfect, like if you're watching something else and it goes to commercial, you flip over and see if a race is about to start. Very competitive, obviously, as these great athletes are trying to earn their spot in Paris next month. And I've tried to time it where I've seen Lakeville's Regan Smith, who is a 3-time medal winner, and trying to get back again. I missed her race last night where she broke an American record in the 100 backstroke. She won the second semifinal, broke the American record. I'm assuming the final is tonight, and it's expected that she will qualify for the 100 back, as well as the 4x100 medley, which she won a silver for back in 21. Obviously, swimming for Stanford, but a Lakeville native, and we always cheer for one of us when it comes to the Olympics. And Katie Ledecky is probably the GOAT when it comes to women's swimming, and she will be the focal point, and rightfully so, when the Olympics begin. But certainly most of us will have our eye on Regan Smith, and with hopes that maybe she can finally bring home a gold medal. And I assume tonight will be her chance at earning her spot in Paris. Tonight is also Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Finals. I know you missed Game 4. You had a buddy in town. You had social things to do.
Yeah.
We talked on Sunday morning about the parallels of the 2 Game 4s. Both teams facing elimination. Both teams blow out their other team, the Mavericks and the Oilers, respectively. And we saw what happened in Game 5 in the NBA last night. Boston returned the favor. Do you expect the parallels to continue tonight with Florida back home after getting embarrassed 8-1 in Game 4?
Yeah, I expect it to exactly repeat itself.
You do?
Yeah, I think the Panthers are going to come out at home momentum behind them, chance to win the cup on their home ice. I think it's going to, I don't know if it's going to be a blowout. I don't know, but I think the Panthers do pull it out. I think I said 3-1 or 3-2 yesterday, but I think it'll be
a final score prediction?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So, but I do expect the Panthers to lift a Stanley Cup, which, by the way, you can hear right here on the Fan.
Really?
That's right.
You don't say.
Yeah.
Game 5 on the home of sports, 100.3 FM, the Fan. Twins back in action tonight after a day off, after a sweep of the Athletics. The Red Hot Twins, winners of 5 straight, find themselves now just 5.5 back in the Central, just a half game behind Kansas City. And this winning streak has not so coincidentally run along parallel lines with their 3 best offensive players being red hot. None hotter than Carlos Correa, who listened to Lavelli Neal and said, "Oh, yeah? Okay. I'll show you what I got." And has just, been tearing the what kind of skin is on a baseball? Is it
leather? Tearing this. Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's cowhide, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we'll go with it. He's been ripping that off the ball by the seams. 20 for 36. His last 36 at bats. 11 runs, 11 ribbies. His average, which has been hovering around 240, 250, is now at 308. And we all know Royce Lewis's absurd start to the season with 7 home runs in 12 games. And Byron Buxton also. Not only hitting the ball, but timely hits. Man, just what would Twins fans give to just know that those 3 guys will be healthy throughout the season? Yeah, might miss a game or 2. Load management. Nick, we all know they're going to miss some games. But, man, just to know that those 3 guys could be available, what could this team accomplish? Certainly would be nice to see. And if only 2, if you could be asked right now, only 2 of these 3 guys can be healthy for the rest of the year, which guy would you throw out? I would think my immediately thought, the first name that came to my head was Buxton.
Yeah.
Which, it's hard, though, because he's so good defensively and he's so fast on the base paths. And, if we're going to be honest, who's the most likely? I hate to say it. It's probably Byron, although Royce is making a nice case for that. But I think Twins fans are just so desperate to see what Royce Lewis can do that the idea of knowing you're going to have him for the rest of the season at the expense of Buxton, I think they would take that. And Correa, just with the chops of who he is as a leader and how hot he can get, and the defense too. I think begrudgingly I would say Buxton. Curious Twins fans, if one of those 3 guys, if you know you're going to have 2 for the rest of the year, but it's going to cost you 1, who's the one you would sacrifice? I don't know why I'm even thinking that way. Maybe we could actually have a year where they're all healthy. Pablo Lopez on the hill tonight, if they play. Thunderstorms.
Yeah, they look likely. I'll say that.
It does not look good. We might be looking at another doubleheader tomorrow. But you'd like to keep these games on the docket when you're playing the teams below 500. Tampa Bay Rays in town for the first of 3 tonight at 6:40. As I said, Pablo Lopez on the hill. We both watched the U.S. Open, right? Pretty much cover to cover. Yep. I don't think I missed a minute. Really, I watched hours throughout the week. I'm sure many of you did. Just shocking finish for Rory McIlroy, who had looked so good, so lights out. And to see him miss not 1, but 2 putts of under 3 feet was absolutely stunning to open up the door for Bryson DeChambeau, who was equally fantastic and really struggled on Sunday, couldn't find a fairway, and it felt like every bit of crappy fairway, or rough, the waist areas he landed in.
What is it, sawgrass or?
Wiregrass.
Wiregrass, yeah. That's right, wiregrass.
Wiregrass. Felt like he got so fortunate with his lies, except for maybe 1 late. Every time he was in that stuff, well, what do you know? His ball's sitting up just fine. No issues. So he was scrambling, but he was certainly the benefactor of a collapse by Rory, who I wasn't thrilled. And I've become a big Rory fan, like a lot of people. I mean, you go back to the Ryder Cup when it was here.
Yeah.
And I think For me, the most memorable moment, as I look back at that Ryder Cup, was he and Patrick Reed dueling against each other, where they were pointing to each other, and Rory's trying to get the crowd because they're all chanting USA and cheering for Patrick Reed. And now, I mean, I root for Rory virtually every week, and I think part of it is the Full Swing documentary. You got to know him a little bit, and he just seemed like a real stand-up cool guy. He has been the face of the PGA in their battle with LIV and didn't take the money, which for some of us old school guys respect that and want the best for him. Others say, hey, do what you got to do. If they're offering you millions, wherever the money comes from, I have no problem with that, and that's fine. For me, I like the fact that Rory said no and has stood by the PGA, even if he kind of got screwed and they ended up going to bed anyway. But I didn't like the fact that I read or saw on social media shortly after the Open ended that Rory was in his car and driving away basically before Bryson lifted the trophy up over his head. He was out. Didn't answer questions, didn't talk to the media. And look, it's hard to blame him. I get it, right? He hasn't won a major in 10 years. He's been favored, and one of the top, every time there's a major, it feels like Rory's one of the top 3 or 4 guys you got to think about. And he's come close a number of times. And he won 4 majors, before he was 25, 26? Mm-hmm. And now he's waited, 38 or 40 majors since? And this one was in his hands. And he blew a couple putts that you and I would give each other. Like, we would not even putt. I don't know about you. I've never played with you. But if I'm inside 2.5 feet, I'm picking up my ball and I'm moving on.
Yeah, of course. If it's in the leather, you're picking it up.
I'm not. It's a gimme, for sure. It doesn't work that way. And the idea that he just left and didn't face the media rubs me the wrong way. I understand how hard it was for him, but I'm surprised, a guy like Rory, for all I know about him, that he wouldn't face the music. And he finally did yesterday. He posted on his Instagram, basically, yesterday was a tough day, probably the toughest I've had in my nearly 17 years as a golfer. First, I'd like to congratulate Bryson. He's a worthy champ, exactly what pro golf needs right now. I think we can all agree on that. Goes on to say, I'll rue the 2 putts I missed on 16 and 18, but I'll look at the positives. I'm resilient. I've shown that over the last 17 years, and I will again. But he closes with, I'm going to take a few weeks away from the game to process everything and build myself back up for my defense of the Genesis Scottish Open and the Open at Royal Troon. I don't know what his schedule was. Clearly he wasn't planning on taking a few weeks off. Mm-hmm. And I think we can all understand mentally why. And I think what's going to be interesting for those of us that love to follow professional golf is, okay, he's been resilient, he says, and he's been one of the greats. Maybe, since Tiger, the greatest player of this generation, you could argue. Koepka's probably in that mix.
He's certainly the most popular, or one of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will this define him? Will this become his Bill Buckner moment that he never comes back from? Like, Bill Buckner, for those of you like Brett, too young to remember.
Well, I know the story.
All right.
Yeah.
Back in the mid-'80s, let the ball go between his legs, and that's what Bill Buckner is known for. I, grew up loving baseball and know that Bill Buckner was one of the best hitters for years and years, one of the best contact hitters in baseball, but he's never going to be thought of that. He's thought of the guy that let the ball go between his legs. Will Rory end up being that? Maybe not to that level, but the guy that can't close, that can't, like he had the moments early, like Jordan Spieth, and then everything dried up. Do you think Rory McIlroy wins another major?
I'd like to hope so. And because of Full Swing, I've turned into a Rory guy as well. The thing I like is that he really cares about the game. That's like a big part of his psyche. Yep. He's not so much money driven as he is. He wants what's best for golf for the next generation and to build up the game of professional golf. And something about that connects with me. But it was brutal being a Rory guy. And I was watching it at a clubhouse with probably like 25, 30 people. There are people cheering against Rory, like actively cheering against him.
Is that just a USA thing, you think?
Maybe it is. I personally don't get that because I'm not a big Bryson guy, but he's coming around. But regardless, that was absolutely heartbreaking. I do think he does, but it doesn't rub me the wrong way that he left.
No.
He's been doing it for 17 years. He's faced the music before, but this is like a next level of heartbreak. And I don't know if if for whatever reason it doesn't bother me all that much. I can relate to, or try to empathize with him and what he was feeling in that moment of literally having it right there, something you've been working on for 10 years now to try to get that back, and to let it slip over that, which he hasn't missed a putt in that range, I think, all year. It was like 400 some putts that he made in a row from that range. And he missed 2 of them on the back.
The last one, the way they had that close up of his putter, it looked like he was completely lined up wrong. Like, what are you seeing there? It was like way left of the, even if
is there like an armchair putter? Is that what you would call it? Or, because there's the Monday quarterback, there's the armchair. What would you call that for golf? There's got to be a term for that.
Yeah, Monday morning putter. I just was stunned like everybody that he missed 2 of those. We'll see. That's going to be an interesting story to follow now. How does Rory respond? And, of course, he'll play the Scottish, but the British Open following that will be the one that everyone's eyes will be on Rory McIlroy and his game. All right, we'll pause here. I want to clean up some texts that have come in on a number of subjects that we've gotten to. Plenty of NFL conversation between now and noon, and about a half hour from now, the boss has asked me to come up with 5 nice things to say about the purple. As if that's like, you want to be in the big seat 9 to noon? All right. Come up with 5 nice things to say about the purple. It wasn't easy, but I'll do that in about a half hour. We'll come back with much more 9 to noon on the Fan.
If you want to chime in what's happening with your favorite KFAN shows, you can make your voice heard on the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. Just let us know what you say by texting your message to 64686. That's 64686. Standard text message and day rates apply.
All right, back with you, 10:47 on a Tuesday. It's 9 to noon. Sinykin for PA, who's out west, enjoying some time off before we get closer and closer to training camp. And, he gets that window around Canterbury, right, where he can take a few days off, but then the racing begins. So some well-earned time off for PA. Is he back tomorrow? Do you know?
Good question.
What's his schedule? I shouldn't have. I mean, you're not PA's keeper. You wouldn't necessarily know. But I thought it might show up somewhere.
I can tell you, I will be here with someone. That's the information I have right now.
Well, Nordo's a new dad.
Correct.
Congrats to him. Yep. He would probably be sitting in this chair if that were not the case. So very happy for Nordo and his wife and family on the new addition. All right, I want to clean up a few texts and tweets that have come in. Back in the 9 o'clock hour, we feted George Mikan, who would have turned 100 today. The first great big man in NBA history who won 5 championships with the Minneapolis Lakers, which, begged the question, is he the greatest Minnesota pro sports athlete of all time? Not native Minnesotan, but just the most awarded, successful Minnesota pro athlete. He's clearly one. I'm going with Maya Moore, number 2. And then we could have a conversation. And I'm being ripped for saying that no Vikings belong in the top 10. I don't think I said that. I just don't think any Vikings belong at the top of the list. I think championships matter when you're having this kind of a discussion. And obviously those have been few and far between outside of the Twins. Well, so for me, Kirby comes to mind. But yes, Alan Page, Tarkenton, go back to the 70s. You can throw a few guys into the top 10. I just don't know how high on the list we go. But back to Mikan, talked about the amazing impact he had on the game as far as the rules changing. He was responsible for goaltending being instituted, a shot clock being instituted, widening the lane. He became ABA commissioner, came up with the 3-point line, the red, white, and blue ball, and led the task force that brought the Timberwolves here. I don't even know if I mentioned that. I meant to. I didn't write it down, but it just occurs to me that I remember seeing that. I don't remember that, but he was a longtime proponent of bringing the NBA back to Minnesota. And when a guy like George Mikan speaks, the NBA listens. So he certainly was a major driving force to help Minnesota get the NBA back. It led to a tweet from our good friend Dan Minnesota, who sent a tweet that he had sent out back in March that was likely Mikan related. I didn't know this. In 1954, the NBA experimented with 12-foot baskets and delayed free throws in a Lakers 65-53 win over the Milwaukee Hawks. And so there's the article he attaches, doesn't explain what delayed free throws means. I'm not sure what they did there. But they went with 12-foot baskets for an actual game, which seems preposterous right now. Like, how do you practice that for a couple days? Do you raise the hoops for a couple days and say, all right? But again, you don't do that if you don't have a dominant big guy who's blocking every shot and laying balls in. I don't think dunked back then. I don't think they dunked in the 50s. I think even George Mikan's just laying the ball in. But they quote a number of players and coaches that were involved in that game. And there were actually a few that said, yeah, I don't care. We get used to it. Make it 12 feet. Clearly it didn't. There's been talk before, like this game now, everybody's so big that they should change everything, change the dimensions of the court, raise the basket. But do we really want a 12-foot basket where, like, who could dunk at 12 feet? Is Ant still dunking at 12 feet? I mean, is that a preposterous question? Is it of course he is? Or is it like, no, of course nobody can? I need a great basketball mind. If the baskets were 12 feet, could anybody dunk? And if anybody could, I mean, Ant's, we've seen him, his head's on top of the rim sometimes. Like, he can get up there.
I mean, just for pure size, does Rudy? I mean, he's not the most
you got to still
jumping.
jump. Yeah, I mean, you got to jump.
Yeah.
I mean, you think Zach Edey.
But he's long, though.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It didn't go anywhere, but I guess another.
Where's Yao Ming when you need him? You know?
Yeah, Yao's feet, I don't think would have allowed him to go too high when it comes to verticals. Trying to get up to 12 feet. I threw out, who would you rather have going forward, Jordan Love or Trevor Lawrence? Which leads to the inevitable. I've gotten this so many times this offseason.
I know where you're going.
The single best thing that could happen to the Vikings this offseason would be the Packers paying Love $50 million a year. As a Vikings fan, I'd throw a party. You're all invited. Not to be confused with the same text I would get a year or so ago, a year and a half ago, which was paraphrasing. The single best thing that could happen to the Vikings this offseason would be the Packers trading Aaron Rodgers. Good luck with 30 years of quarterback mediocrity. I'd throw a party. So what will be the next one a year from now? Now, good luck winning just one Super Bowl with Love. It's over now. You've had your party. Enjoy that. How do you answer that?
Now that he's won a Super Bowl, he's going to cost you more. Good luck. We're throwing a party.
Yeah, he looked good for 8 games. You believe in him, so now you got to pay him. Good luck. I'll take my chances because a year ago, we had no idea what Jordan Love was. I had no grand illusions. Just like when Rodgers started. I've said often that, we all can talk about heartbreaking moments as a fan. Both of our fan bases. The list is long. And the most recent heartbreaking one.
We're not allowed to have heartbreaking moments, by the way.
Correct, because we've enjoyed.
We don't have
Right.
There's no such thing as a heartbreaking loss for the Packers.
Correct.
No such thing.
Oh, that irritates Vikings fans to no end. You think you've had heartbreak. You've won a couple Super Bowls. But
heartbreak is only a Minnesota thing. No one else has ever experienced sports heartbreak, ever.
It's a very good point.
Yep.
The Seahawks onside kick that cost the Packers a Super Bowl is the most recent heartbreak.
Ugh.
But for the one that I was in attendance at, I've often said the 07 NFC title game, or the 08, I guess, the 07 season, when Favre threw the pick in overtime, his last pass as a Packer, a team that was 15-1 and thought it was just clear sailing to the Super Bowl. The Giants win in overtime on a freezing cold day at Lambeau, and you knew it was over, although you didn't know. But Favre said he was done, he was retiring, and Rodgers had sat for a few years, so it was time to pass the torch. And for us, it was like, well, we have no idea what Rodgers is.
I think we still have the Gerby voicemail from that game in the system.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That would be classic. But that was that similar feeling, like, all right, well, now what? I mean, we got this guy. He's been around a few years, but it's not going to be Favre, and he turned out to be better. And same thing now, was with Love. Well, now you got Love, and we've had 30 years. Now what's he going to be like? No idea what his future will be. He may be an average quarterback. He may be below average. But he showed enough last year, in my mind, and in most people's minds, to get paid. You pay a guy in his 4th season if you think he can be your guy. One fan... Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I know, it's okay.
Yep.
It's fair. 651 guy texts in, Jordan Love or Trevor Lawrence, because I threw out, Lawrence just got paid. Love's about to get paid. who would you be more comfortable paying? Who would you rather have for the next 8 to 10 years? I'm a Vikings fan, so of course I have my hatred for the Packers, but unfortunately, I'd think I'd pick Jordan Love with everything both players have put on tape. Lawrence might have a bigger upside, and I say might, but I still think I'd go with Jordan Love. After saying that, I think I threw up a bit in my mouth. I understand that. I think all I'm saying is I think it's a fair question. I don't think green and gold glasses, put those aside for a minute. I don't think it's a slam dunk right now that you'd say, yes, I would absolutely rather have Trevor Lawrence than Jordan Love. I don't think that's a complete slam dunk. I could be wrong.
And it goes back to this, and I can send it back to the Vikings, too, because they're having a similar conversation with, is it the player talent or is it the situation? Yeah, and it's the same thing with if you put Trevor Lawrence in the Packers offense with 3 years of learning behind Rodgers, and you've got Matt LaFleur and you've got great skill players, would he be better than he is in Jacksonville where it's not a good situation? It's the same thing with the Vikes right now. Is Sam Darnold just bad and he stinks because he hasn't done anything in the NFL? Or is it because his situation was bad? Now he's got a great situation with a lot of skilled players in Minnesota. It's the same kind of thing. So
it is, and it's what makes this coming season really fascinating from a Vikings perspective, because we all know it's J.J. McCarthy for the future, but will Darnold make things difficult in a good way? That, man, he's got skill, and he's being coached well, and he's got more talent around him than he's ever had, except maybe last year, but he wasn't the starter last year. So this opportunity is there. His career is hanging in the balance, and, he knows it. And whether he's auditioning for another team this season, most likely, this is his last shot, I would think, at meaningful playing time in the NFL, which makes things really interesting. When we come back, we're going to keep on the NFL wagon for a while. In about 15, 20 minutes, I did my homework. The bosses asked me to come up with 5 nice things to say about the Purple. Somehow, I made that happen. I took a shower afterwards. We'll do that at 11:15. Up next, ESPN.com ranked all 32 teams off seasons. And one of our 2 teams finished in last place. We will discuss that when we come back. 9 to noon on The Fan.